I need you to trust me because I'm a novice. What's up, everybody, and welcome to episode 26. I am your host, Sammi St. Ledger, and this is Trust Me, I'm a Novice, the podcast about connections. We are talking science, psychology, spirituality, and about ourselves. And if you saw the title today, we are talking about self. But before we get to that, last week I sat down and talked about the history behind abortion. So if you have not seen episode 25 yet, go ahead, give it a click and check it out. That being said, like I said, today we are diving into self, and I am giving 12 pieces of advice for college graduates. I have been a college grad now for 1 full year, and I definitely feel like I have some advice that I wish I would have gotten when I graduated. So that being said, today I'm here to tell you what to expect and what you can do to make the process of graduating and moving into post-grad life a little bit easier. Trust me, trust yourself, and trust the process because we are getting things started. So getting into it. Oh my goodness, this topic is a topic that I feel like I've been covering it kind of consistently throughout shows because I give little tidbits about my life here and there, and I've definitely learned a lot of things. But college grad and just being a college grad and graduation in general is such an odd topic because, at least in my experience, absolutely nobody prepares you for it. Nobody tells you what to expect. And I think there's this almost glamorization of your young 20s, of your early 20s, that you think you're going to be traveling, you think you're going to be moving out, refurbishing your apartment, you're going to be working this fantastic job where you're already kind of high up in perhaps this company or something else you're working on is going to take off, you're going to have all these friends, you're going to be going out constantly. And the thing with that is that's not really what happens at all, unfortunately. And when I think back to myself, I lived my life thinking I knew exactly what was next pretty much all the time. And in many ways I did. There's so much structure leading all the way up until you graduate college, even in ways you don't fully understand. It's almost like I've noticed as you age, you get a little more freedom here and there. But what happens when you graduate is that your freedom is, you almost have 100% freedom. Although, like I said, we'll talk, but there obviously will be some barriers when it comes to doing exactly what you want. So I figured, like I said, it's been 1 year since I've been out. This podcast is called Trust Me, I'm a Novice because I'm not an expert in everything, but I do think being out for a year, I really have some advice that I think will be helpful. And when I first think about it, and like I said, how nobody tells you what to expect, the biggest thing about graduation to really prep for is that you need to fully expect and be aware that you are stepping into the absolute unknown. 100%. And the thing with the unknown is it's scary. It's weird. It's very much an energy of, what do I do now? What's next? I've had my whole life planned out for me, and now I don't. And it's a crazy concept, and you're so not used to it. So at least for me, it was extremely jarring when I first came out. And I think there's 3 things that happen right off the bat when you graduate, and 3 main feelings that start to kind of switch off running through your mind and body. The first one is burnout. I think burnout is massive in the sense that when I think about college, and I've made jokes about this, you probably, didn't eat vegetables that much. You probably drank way more alcohol than water, if we're being real. You probably didn't sleep, whether it was because you were partying or whether it was because your classes were difficult. And a lot of college to me was study as much as you can, do as well as you can. The minute you send in that last paper, you're taking a shot. Like, quite frankly, that's what it's like. And you're going out, waking up the next day, redoing that thing. There wasn't a lot of time for any type of just chill. And I think it's crazy in a way that your body adapts to it. You get used to doing that over and over again. It becomes your normal. But not taking care of yourself when it comes to nutrition, when it comes to sleeping, when it comes to just stillness, being quiet, when it comes to being by yourself, it's not sustainable. So when you graduate, I definitely think one of the main experiences is a sense of burnout where you're just exhausted. Like, you finally made it, you finally graduated, and your body is pretty much ready to just rest in any sense. It could be just not seeing people, it could be sleeping a ton, and it really could even manifest in just having absolutely no motivation, which again isn't crazy when you consider you just spent 4 years, or 3.5, depending on when you graduated, but you spent that amount of time going constantly, burning the candle at both ends, as John Mulaney would say. So that's the first emotion that I would say is constantly experienced. And with that, I come to my first piece of advice, which is allow any type of sensations to come through the body, whether they are physical or mental. One thing that stuck out to me and that I find fascinating looking at it from a psychological perspective is that when it comes to your mental health and when it comes to experiencing any form of trauma, the body can push down something bad that happened because it doesn't feel safe. And until it feels safe again, it will not let that up. And that can happen. For instance, that emotion, say something bad happened, it could be suppressed for years, like 4 years. I'm talking even like 8 years. So you went through college, obviously, if you're watching this video, I would assume, if not, hey. And with that, you finally come out, you're probably back home with some form of family or family friends. And it's likely going to be the first time your body might be feeling safe enough to let up some of the struggles that you went through at school. So don't get down on yourself, and do not be surprised if you begin to experience emotions coming up of anger, of sadness, of frustration, of why did I do that at school? Why did that happen? Why was that person like that? I think sometimes we get down on ourselves when we're still upset about a situation that happened over a year ago, over 2 years ago. But sometimes it's coming up because it has to go. And you actually didn't give that emotion enough tending to fully be experienced. So whatever's coming up, just let it. And another thing that could be even possible to happen is sometimes the body, when it comes to also trauma, the way it heals through it is just sleeping. So you might be insanely exhausted and just literally be sleeping, just constantly, just to truly push past a lot of things that happened. And even moving past that, because you're now stepping into this unknown, it's very common, and I would say expect some form of mood swings to start happening. Not necessarily anything crazy, although it could be, but you're now going to begin feeling a lot of different things because you don't know what's next, and it's super normal. So I would almost say to, in a way, radically accept those emotions and just accept that that's probably what's going to happen within your brain and body. Now, the next thing that I would say emotion-wise that you are going to experience is this really weird feeling of what I would describe as relief mixed with celebration. And I almost want to say celebration in quotes because you just graduated. And technically speaking, it's something to be celebrated, but the number one emotion I felt around graduation was relief. Honestly, I really liked college. I think I learned so much. I think I grew so much. I made great relationships. But at the same time, I think a lot of people could relate to this feeling of, oh my God, get me out of here. Like, get me the fuck out. Honestly, it was like how I felt within my last month of school. I was like, I love this place. I like most of these people, but Lord, get me out. I don't even care where I go. So I felt a lot of relief like that. Like my shoulders were finally like, whew, okay. I'm finally by myself again. I can finally just decompress from a lot of drama, but also just like anything. Like I was saying, like not taking care of my health, I could finally just chill. But then there's also this, I would say, light sense of celebration. And there should be, because obviously you just graduated. When I think about the amount of learning and growth that you went through in 4 years, it's really unprecedented. It's impressive that you got through it. And what's odd about, though, feelings of celebration, at least in my opinion, is that I think you usually get it from adults, where it's a lot of congratulations, like, oh my gosh, you graduated, that's awesome. And to me, when I would hear those things, I was proud of myself, like softly, I would say, because I was aware that I had done something that was considered a milestone, but I didn't feel like celebrating, or really didn't feel like I closed a crazy chapter, because of how I didn't really know what was next. And my friend I was with yesterday described it really well. She was explaining that when you're in high school, for instance, and you plan on going to college, when you graduate, it's like, oh my gosh, well, I'm going here next. And I'm so excited for college. And it's almost like, because you know your next step and you have that sense of security, you can be excited. You can celebrate. Kind of like I said with emotions and safety, where it's like, it feels supernatural too. But when you're graduating, you don't know what's next. It's hard to be super happy when in the back of your mind, you're kind of like, yo, I don't know what's actually going on. So that is going to come and go, those feelings of kind of being proud, but also being like, what? And what I would say to that, in my second piece of advice, is do your best to celebrate the fact that you graduated. And that could look like anything. It could be a simple mindset of being proud of yourself, but also enjoy the grad parties. Really just sit in the moments of celebration and tap in, absorb everything around you, and just be really aware of the exact now in those moments, so you can really absorb what's going on and be grateful that you did it, but also that you have people that are celebrating the fact that you did it. So try. I think that's a situation that can be hard. At least it was difficult for me to really kind of celebrate that win, but try to just sit in it, sit back, take it all in. Moving forward, the third emotion that I think is, at least for me, has been the absolute most prevalent, and I think it's really good to just be prepared for, is it's likely, it's not absolute, but it is likely in some form that you will experience anxiety. And that's so normal. And the thing with that is, I guess, going back for a second with my own experience, when I think about mental health, I've struggled with anxiety, but I haven't struggled with it in the way that it's ever been really a constant for me. It's been something that comes up once in a while. It wasn't something that I experienced every single day. And when I graduated, pretty soon, I wouldn't say it was instantaneous, but I think once that kind of celebratory feeling began to wear off even more, even though, like I said, it wasn't super strong, right away, you get this sense of anticipation and what's going on and all these thoughts. And they begin to manifest in just this feeling of fear, because it's like, I don't know what's going on with my life. I have no idea. And that's just normal. You might start to experience and not even quite know what it is, because you may never have experienced anxiety before. But transitions bring about that anxiety, and something to be said for just stopping. If you were go, 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 and you stop, and your body's so used to going, of course it's going to start to fear some type of fear of what's next. I mean, you might be anxious even, maybe you're moving soon because you have a job out somewhere, or you might be anxious because you don't have a job and you're like, yo, I gotta make money somehow. Lord, help me. My parents can only support me for so long. If you're me, shout out mom and dad. Anyways, so recapping all those are the three that I would say you're going to be most likely to experience. Now, that being said, another thing that I want to say in general with this experience of anxiety, I think a lot of it comes from that capitalism teaches us that our worth is connected to our productivity. It does. I think I, for so long, have pulled so much sense of self-worth and feeling like I was a good person from going to school, from working, from going to school, from working. And the thing with that is life isn't just about your output. It's not. It's also about your relationships. It's also about the simple pleasures. And you probably grinded in some capacity. And I mean, not to say that partying's grinding, but when you are literally killing yourself sometimes at school via studying into the late hours of the night or just throwing toxins like at every inch of yourself, you were going for so long. So you probably in some capacity were in a lot of ways being super productive. So it's okay that after 4 years, you stop and physically smell the roses for a little bit after graduating. So I always try to come back to that mindset when it comes to feeling anxious, that it's okay if you don't have it figured out. It's okay if you're not doing anything. You just spent 4 years doing the absolute most. Moving forward, I think a huge aspect of graduating is working, like I was just touching on. You start to think about, what am I doing for work? And my third piece of advice would be, do not panic if you don't have a job. Don't panic. I think at the end of the year, at the end of school, a lot of people start applying, and you'll see a lot of posts on LinkedIn, on Facebook, that's like, I'm so excited to take this position in this place. And sometimes if you don't have that, it's a little like, oh my God, I'm behind. And like, it's not true, even though it feels like that. The thing with graduating is some people do move into the workforce right away, but other people don't. And they might not move into the workforce for literally a year, if not more. And especially now when I think of moving into their actual career path, that could take way more than a year. So when it comes to not panicking, a couple things I would say you want to keep in mind. The first one is that when it comes to people that have jobs, the grass is not always greener when you have a job. I know multiple people now that have come out of school, had that right off the bat job that looked super glamorous, looked super prestigious, and like they were just like doing the most in like the best way possible. And now I come to hear like a year later, or even some people that were way older than me several years later, that they were absolutely miserable in that job, like absolutely miserable. And I don't know as far as to say regretted taking it, but it wasn't like it looked as glamorous as it seemed. So really keep that in mind. Now, that being said, if you do have a job, I wish you the absolute best of luck. But I would definitely say, again, it's like it can still feel anxious and it can still feel uncertain moving into a new job because now, you know, we got new bosses, you might live somewhere new. A lot of things are still changing. So also what I would say is if you have a new job, just literally try to go with the flow and learn from it and don't take it too seriously. Not to say like, don't work your hardest because you absolutely should, but be aware that your pace of life is going to switch because you're moving now from, I don't want to say like the play force, but you're going from like a fun college atmosphere where you put in work in school, but now you're just going to be putting in straight up work. So you're definitely going to have that switch. And I know for a lot of people, life kind of gets really boring, honestly, right off the bat. And it's, again, something that you're not expecting. So prep for knowing that there's going to be that change if you're moving into the workforce. And like I said, I hope it's great, but just be aware that it might not be quite what you expected. You might be feeling a little bit bored. We'll get into it later, but you might be feeling a little bit lonely. And all of that is also going to be normal. Now, continuing the conversation with jobs, my fourth piece of advice when you are now applying for jobs, if you really are interested off the bat in something, is that adopt the mindset that if it misses you, it's not for you. You could get your hopes up a lot, but what I will say is you're going to be applying for jobs and you will probably not be hearing back that much. That was shocking to me at first. I thought I was super qualified for stuff. I thought people would just want me. I don't know, maybe it's my ego, but they didn't, and it's okay. So you might get jobs, you might get interviews, you might hear nothing, but think about it like this. Every time you get that interview, if it falls through, if, they give it to somebody else, think of it as it's just not for me and something else will be. So my fifth piece of advice is don't panic if you don't know what you want to do. The first dilemma is, oh my God, I don't have a job. The second dilemma is, okay, I have a job, but I don't know what to expect. And the third dilemma is I don't know what I'm doing with my life. Yeah, and that's scary. I think that's a super normal feeling that is not always talked about. Don't panic. I know it feels like something we should panic over. It's not. Always keep in mind, and I would look up some of the stats on this if you get a chance to. I've been trying to figure it out, but I know basically I've looked at a couple different things, so they kind of conflict. But it seems to be at least half of everybody that goes to school and graduates with a bachelor's in something doesn't use it. Like they do not go into a career that relates to that at all. And I think you feel really obligated to because maybe you put in so much work just to get that degree, but it doesn't mean that you have to do it. Honestly, the cool thing about graduating is you don't have to do literally anything. Within reason, but you don't have to do anything that you don't want anymore. So it's okay if you don't know what to do. And now I'm sure you're thinking, okay, Sammi, yeah, but I want to do something. Like what, I don't know what to do. How do I figure out what I want to do? What I would say with that is just give it time. Give it absolutely as much time as possible. We talked about how college was go, go, go. If you are not sitting and being still, you never are going to have that mental clarity to figure out what you want to do in the first place. Things happen over time, and it might take you coming out of school and being unemployed for a couple months and doing very little to start realizing, hey, I'm actually kind of interested in this. When we sit with ourselves, we slowly over time begin to really discover ourselves on a much deeper level. And I think because post-grad's usually going to accompany less friends, it's going to accompany less, like I said, partying atmosphere, more and more you're going to be with yourself. And that's really where the discovery, honestly, I would venture to say, begins once again. There's always more to learn. And when you sit, you are slowly going to figure out what you want to do. And again, if you're thinking, okay, but I don't know what, I just sit and wait for it to like go off in my head, not necessarily. My sixth piece of advice when you're trying to figure out, okay, well, how do I even figure out what I want to do? Explore anything that you feel pulled to do or anything that you are curious about. Literally anything. This is a great opportunity because you're probably not going to be doing that much if you don't have a job. And that is going to create space and time to do stuff that maybe you've always wanted to try, but never felt like you had the time to. Now, going off an example, when I think about myself, the podcast is kind of the most clear one, but I've done a lot of other things upon graduating that have been creative pursuits and different things that I figured out that I've enjoyed. And it just happened from me sitting around, having extra time and being like, I'm actually going to try this out. And the cool thing about that, and what I would say is try to pursue something. I'm not talking about something necessarily that even has to pay you money, but try to pursue something that you're interested in for a couple different reasons. For an example, with this podcast, right? Started this podcast. I didn't have any type of job within a company. Technically speaking, if you've ever heard the story of this podcast, it was supposed to be the job, but that fell through. And the thing was starting something like this podcast, but as well as could be something as simple as maybe you start shadowing a family friend that does something you're curious of. That could be another way you could start digging into new things. Going after something that you're curious about or exploring is going to be massively helpful because, for one, it's going to keep you busy. That's going to help because when you're sitting around constantly doing nothing, that's when you create space to get scared, to get depressed, to get just feeling in a funk. And when you're busy in some capacity, you're going to start feeling good because at least you're being productive in some way. The second thing it's going to do is give you the opportunity to discover what you like. You could go into something, shadow it, be like, absolutely no. I could have put out podcast number 1 and been like, see ya, but I didn't. I figured out that, okay, this is something that I've noticed that I like, and I kept going with it. And the third thing it's going to do is give you something to talk about with people you interview with, or even give you something to talk about on job applications. I think a lot of people get tweaked when they don't have a job, that they're going to sit down at this interview and get the good old question of, what have you been doing since you graduated? And personally, the last thing I wanted to say was absolutely nothing, even if I wanted to, even if that was my mindset. Where having this podcast, it was so easy, even though I wasn't working with a formal company, to sit down and get that question and be, hey, I started my own podcast. Yeah, I have about like 20 plus episodes out so far, and I'm steady teaching myself social media marketing. Like, that's a good answer. It's like, oh, okay, you couldn't get employed by a company, so you started creating your own thing. Cool. Right away, you're showing somebody that you have a good work ethic and you care about doing something. Just the stars weren't aligned. I promise you, if you find something to do, employers won't even like bat an eye when you tell them that you weren't employed with any type of company. They'll be like, oh, great, and just keep going. Now, moving on to my seventh piece of advice, and this one is really huge in terms of your mental health, is you have to, in any capacity, take care of yourself. This seems kind of simple, but it's actually huge, because the thing with graduating and the thing with waiting to get employed, or the thing with starting something new that's scary, like a new job or maybe even grad school in another state, is that it's so easy to just get stuck. I would say, especially when you're not doing anything. And because of that, you have to find ways to fight it. I would say the number one most important thing when it comes to really taking care of yourself is, for the love of all that is good in the world, you have to start exercising. You have to. And I don't necessarily mean, you go crazy and hop on CrossFit or, perhaps become a professional MMA fighter, unless you want to, could explore. But what I am saying is that you start to go on walks a couple days a week. You start to do something super gentle, like I always say, yoga. You lift a couple weights. When you're physically not moving, it's signaling to your brain, nothing is happening. We are stuck. But if you're getting up, you're having some type of decent workout, right away, body's moving. Body's moving is telling the brain, oh, okay, life is moving, and you're going to feel better. Past that, talked about it before in a couple episodes, but when you work out, you're going to release those endorphins that are going to, again, make you feel better and be good for your mental health. And even past that, any type of movement is going to give you a feeling of productivity. And for me, and I kind of touched on this already, but the lack of productivity, if you're a naturally productive person, when it comes to post-graduation, is the hardest part. Because you stop doing things and you feel like, oh my God, I'm doing nothing, which you can spiral into thinking like, I'm a failure, like I haven't accomplished anything, I'm not doing enough, which is tough, but it happens. So if you at least know each day, you're like, hey, I did a great workout, that's going to make you feel better. And what I will say is, if you're the type of person that's watching this, like, Sammy, I have never walked in my life. Like I hated gym in high school. I get it. And what I would say to that, if you really are super anti working out, and even past that, if you're like, I don't even know how to implement a good workout routine, I'm the type of person to work out one day and the next day be like, I'm never doing that again. Check out this episode. It's my 4th episode, called Can You Spare Some Change? I talk about how to actually implement sustainable change that works. Basically, I go through tools that I use to implement sustainable change in my life, usually with things like nutrition, eating healthy, and working out. But I recommend listening to this because it'll give you tools to steadily implement change that can actually be sustainable. Another thing to keep in mind, in addition to, like I said, working out, and I'm a huge advocate of eating healthy, it's important to note too the way that your mental health is actually very connected to your diet. So you want to start again. It's a great time to just eat a little healthier. It's also a great time to take care of yourself in the what I would describe as the normal way we view self-care. And I think sometimes we think it's gender specific. Like, what I would say to initially I would think is like, okay, paint your nails, like take that time, do face masks, take a bath, get a massage. But it does not even slightly have to be gender specific. Take care of yourself in whatever way feels good, because it's a lot harder to get stuck and start self-doubting and not feeling good if, let's be real, every time you look in the mirror and you're like, all right, I'm be real with you, I look fucking great today. Like, you're not, it's a lot harder to get down when you are looking good and feeling good physically. So keep that in mind, even just for the sake of making sure and kind of really, I would say, putting a boundary in place so your mental health doesn't, take it, Jack and Jill it, take a tumble down. What's that nursery? Not important, but it'll stop you from falling into anything. Now, going off of this self-care, idea, I'd say my eighth piece of advice is implementing any form of mindfulness. I've already talked about it, but anxiety likely, I hope not, but it's likely that it's going to start peaking at some point. And the problem with anxiety when we are trying to make major life decisions is we get what I would describe as squirrel brain. It's like, I think about like a hamster running on a wheel, where it's like you can't stop thinking at all. Sometimes I would be thinking so much that I like couldn't even tap into like my own bodily sensations. Like I'd be sitting down and all at once be like, oh my God, I'm outside. Like my brain would just be going and going and going. And the struggle is I got to a point that I would wake up with anxiety almost every day. Like I would wake up and be like, I'm afraid, I'm scared again. Ah, fuck. And it was pretty normal. So because of that, the thing that I would say almost have to do, and I almost beg you to do this because you won't even realize until you start doing it that it makes a huge difference, is try to implement something mindful. Now, my go-to, right, I always say some form of meditation. A lot of people, and including people in my immediate family, are like, Sammi, I don't meditate. I can't sit still. I get it. I understand. I also can't usually sit still. But there's a lot of other forms of just pure stillness that are going to help you calm down. Because when you calm down, I would say the hamster stops running on the wheel. And when the hamster isn't running on the goddamn wheel, you can actually think clearly. And when you think clearly, then you can again start making decisions that are going to benefit you. And again, that could be any decision. So other ways that we can implement little bits of mindfulness into the day that are going to help control some form of anxiety. One, I talk about yoga, but exercise in general is a huge one. Yoga just is obviously an exercise more based in mindfulness. Another one, though, is definitely some type of journaling. That's going to help. That's going to help at least organize your thoughts. But definitely always preach it, but walking. Walking is going to clear your mind. I know it's this funny trend now to go on hot girl walks, but yeah, you got to go on hot girl walks. Like, not gender specific. You just go on your little hot girl walk and you'll come back and probably feel at least a little bit less anxious, a little more clear. And I've said this before, but when you're feeling stuck and you leave the house, it is uncanny how the brain goes, oh my God, we're not stuck. Oh my God, life. Oh, there's people. Oh, I have neighbors. Like that's kind of what happens. So make sure you're doing something like that. And another one that I would say, especially when it comes to if you are feeling massive forms of anxiety, like at least I was, is do not be afraid to stop drinking, stop smoking. Now I know smoking sometimes helps with anxiety, but at the same time, do not be afraid to stop any type of substance intake that isn't helpful. Even caffeine for some people, that can also make people anxious. I had hit a point, like I said, of feeling so constantly anxious. And the thing with it was I wouldn't say that I was relying on alcohol. It wasn't so much that I was developing any type of problem. But when you're anxious and at the end of the day, you're doing nothing, A, you're kind of bored, but B, you're kind of like, I feel a little weird. So it's like, oh, I'll have a drink, like chill out, kind of have fun. But the problem with that is when you get in a habit of doing it, and I'm not even saying like getting drunk every night. I'm saying just maybe like a drink or two or three, keeps going. I talked about it in a past episode. If you want to check it out, I'll actually link it up here when I talk about basically why the Sunday Scaries exist when it comes to binge drinking. But alcohol affects a neurotransmitter in your stomach called serotonin. Most of your serotonin, which is a neurotransmitter that stabilizes your mood, is in your stomach. So we're drinking, we're just throwing toxins into the stomach, and the stomach's supposed to be like, nah, bro, I'll make you feel happy tomorrow. I promise. Like, promise. Yeah, no. Like if you were anxious and you were consistently drinking, it's actually going to progressively make the anxiety and symptoms of depression even worse because you're physically not stabilizing your body for your mental health to be intact. Yeah. Had to learn that one the hard way, but I did. So don't be afraid to just take a massive break. I'm not saying indefinitely, but figure out or just be real with yourself. If you need to take a break and just straight up do it. I don't care if your friends are going out. You can literally drink water and hang with them. You can drink lemonade. You can have a cup and no one's going to ask you if there's alcohol in it. Like maybe you'll learn how to be fun without drinking. Yeah. I've heard it's possible. Anyways, now, one other thing that I would say with implementing mindfulness and what might be the absolute easiest way to do it is in the morning when you wake up, do not check your phone. If we look into that even a little bit more psychologically, when you get on a social media app, right away, your brain has to start making decisions, whether you like things or not. And you actually will experience decision fatigue. But one thing that I noticed is that if I get up and check my phone, I get squirrel brain right away. And like, I lean over, and I don't really do this much, but it would be like whenever I lean over and check my phone, it's like, if there's a hamster in my brain, it's like I'm getting, and we kind of play this back and forth of like, he's going to jump on and I can't stop him now. And then he's off. And so am I for the rest of the day. Pardon the pun. So what I would say is don't check your phone so you're not super stimulated. Realistically, when we wake up in the morning, we're in hypnosis, a form of hypnosis for like 30 minutes. So it's actually really important when it comes to your subconscious mind of what you're intaking. And the last thing you need is people on social media just doing honestly shit that doesn't matter. Like, sounds bad, but yeah. So don't check that. And I would say when you go downstairs and are having whatever you have for breakfast, I've heard of things basically called coffee meditations, but where it's when you're making coffee or if you make tea, or even could be as simple as pouring water or cooking breakfast, focus really in on that because that's going to completely ground you for the day. And it really, really helps. I'm talking, it could be as simple as for the first 20 minutes of the day when you're kind of in that like zombie-esque mode that you're sitting with a cup of coffee or whatever you consume in the morning and just looking out the window and looking at the birds and looking at the squirrels. It's better that you see the squirrels outside in the morning than let them run in your head. That's what I'm getting at. Moving forward, what I would say, my 9th piece of advice is that when you graduate, life is going to slow down drastically. And that includes when it comes to seeing people and being social. So 9 for me, the 9th piece of advice I have is to accept that there will be some form of loneliness that is going to start moving its way into your life. If you were like me in college, I was so used to, like I said, submitting that last essay and immediately just being, oh, bet we're going out. Oh, bet I'm meeting this person here. We're doing this. And being around just a pants load of people, truly. I was so used to that and I loved it. But when you're home, probably, like I said, in a lot of instances, you're probably back with your parents. You might live with a sibling, you might not. You probably don't live near a lot of people that you went to school with, especially if you're in an out-of-state school. So naturally, you're going to start feeling that little bit of loneliness. I think another thing that isn't always talked about, especially if now you get a job in another state, and I've heard this from a lot of people, is people saying like, there's nobody out here and I don't even know how to make friends. Like I literally have no idea. And that feeling is really scary and it's very isolating. So it's something to, again, really prep for and expect that you're gonna probably in some capacity get a little bit lonely. And again, it's normal. Now, moving forward with that, what I would definitely say, A, is like a piece of advice to, I say A a lot, and then I don't say B, fun fact, if you watch a lot of episodes. But when you're feeling those feelings of loneliness, A, it's okay to sit in them a little bit. And sometimes I do think that's where we, again, get this idea of self-discovery. But B, you can fight it. Call people. I don't care if you're not the type to FaceTime. Start FaceTiming. Start calling. It helps a lot. You need to create something. And it could be as simple as calling a family member. It's not like you have to call people that you've never called, but be open to it because it can definitely help. Now, moving into my 10th piece of advice, if you have the opportunity to be social, do it. And if anything, prioritize it. When I talk about the idea of this squirrel brain and this spiraling thinking that begins to happen when you are, I want to say, trapped at home all day, the difference is that when you were at school, you got super used to, like I said, working and then going out. So when you were going out, likely you weren't thinking, oh my God, I could be studying right now. Oh my God, I could be, just fill in the blank, right? But you didn't necessarily or easily slip into a mindset of I could be doing more, because when you're out with your friends in college, you're like, okay, now I'm having fun. Like I did work this morning. Now I'm having fun. But when you're stuck at home, you don't have that moment of socialization where you realize life is more than just me being productive and working. And that opens up a massive window of spiral thinking, is what I would say. So you want to really, really try to the best of your ability to go see your friends. Prioritize seeing them in person over the phone, although the phone is a good substitute, because it's going to do two things. One is that it's going to give you the opportunity to recognize that you are all going to be going through the same thing. It really doesn't matter who you are. I think it's highly likely, no matter what the situation is, that you are going to all be feeling some form of what the hell is going on. And when you can get together and have that shared experience, it's going to make you feel so much better and put it into perspective that everybody is actually feeling like this, and realistically feels like it past probably a year. But past that, the other thing it's going to do is give you the opportunity to just laugh. Like, laughter is the best medicine. It's the saying, but it's true. I've been in a habit recently of calling a very, very good friend that I grew up with, that like one of those friends that you can't look at them without laughing, and like nothing's ever to be laughed about, but it's just funny. But when you call them and you're like panicking, or you're like, I don't know what's going on. Oh, I have this interview. Oh no, like, or past that, you can laugh about like, obviously like all the other changes that are going on. But when you can laugh about it again, it's chilling you out, putting into perspective that everyone's going through this. Let's at least laugh about it or make jokes of it a little bit. Random piece of advice from my sister, not technically listed in my 12. She talked about how she graduated during the pandemic at its peak, and she couldn't see anybody. And I know obviously that was tough on everybody, but she got in the habit of watching SNL every Monday, watching it. And she said it felt like she could reconnect and be social, even though it was through the screen, because they were all making fun of these shared experiences people were having. And again, it gave her that opportunity to laugh and take things less seriously. 11, I think, is huge. My 11th piece of advice is completely forget the timeline you had on moving out. Forget it. Literally, here's the timeline in my, if you can't see it if you're listening, but I have an imaginary timeline, so you can't see it if you're watching either. And just like, roll this little buddy up, rip it in half multiple times, and chuck it out the window. It's gone, all right? Just recycle that shit, okay? Please do, actually, plan it. But I definitely think, and going off of what I said with this glamorization, when you graduate, or even before that, you have this cute, pretty little story of like, I'm going to graduate, and immediately with all the money that I saved during college, wink, wink, hashtag none, I'm going to move out. And then I'm going to find the love of my life. And then we're going to move in together. And like, and it just I'm going to have kids at this specific age. Throw out window now. Get it out of here. It's not moving out. It happens for some people. It does. Some people get jobs. Some people work jobs throughout college, even though half the time you probably didn't make enough to move out, especially if you're going to the city. Like the city in general, wherever you are, is going to be expensive. So, and if you don't have a job in really any capacity, you're not going to have the money to move out. And I think it's a very humbling experience, is what I will say, once you realize if you can't move out that you can't. But again, bringing it back to the normal shared experience, it is very common to move in with your parents when you graduate, or aunts or uncles, grandparents. It's normal to just move back and get your bearings for a year, 2 years, 3 years. That's okay. And yeah, sometimes it sucks because maybe you're not in the hub of things. Like I'm the type that I love being downtown. So not living there sometimes, it's like, ugh, it would be so fun. But at the same time, I go when I can. And again, just kind of accept, all right, you know what? I'm not moving out. And at the same time, hey, maybe if that's your top priority, obviously there are other opportunities. You can maybe get a job if you can't find one in your field. Maybe you start waitressing. Maybe you start nannying. There's some options to move out that you can put in place. And obviously you want to have a plan for some of those goals. But at the same time, I think it's even more helpful to just, again, radically accept the fact that you will probably not move out, like for a hot minute. And But you'd be surprised how much fun it can be living with your parents, man. It's crazy. It's truly a blessing. I can't tell you how many weird things I've come up with to annoy them just in a little bit of time. Every day, I plan it. Anyways, now, so wrapping this whole conversation together with my 12th piece of advice that I would give you, and probably the biggest piece of advice I have is remember that everything in life is temporary. Whatever feelings you have will not last forever. Whatever situation you are in will not last forever. It could seem like it will. It won't. I can almost promise you that it will not. Your situation will change, and often in ways that you do not expect. But hey, in a way, that's the beauty. That's the possibilities now that are beginning to exist. You don't know what's next, but in a lot of ways, it could be exciting. I mean, when I think about this whole year, I could not have predicted really any of it, like at all. Like so many things that have changed, my new interests, my new directions that I want to go in. I've learned so many things. It's sucked sometimes. It's been super scary. It's been incredibly humbling, but also incredibly empowering. So be open to everything and remember again that everything in life is temporary and that you are never stuck. That being said, I am Sammi St. Ledger. If you like the podcast, give it a follow on Instagram at Trust Me I'm a Novice and also on TikTok at Trust Me I'm a Novice. Please give the pod a follow if you liked it and give it a like if you liked it. You too. But we will be back next week. I am Sammi St. Ledger, and as always, trust me, I'm a novice.